Together, the Lenovo Think Edge series and NVIDIA are accelerating edge applications across industries, giving businesses new opportunities to glean insights from their large data sets. Edge AI upgrades the retail experience by analyzing customer movement and behavior to improve traffic flow, managing inventory in real time, and enhancing checkout automation. Edge and AI are unlocking the next level of smart manufacturing by improving safety between workers and machines and refining assembly line inspection processes. In cities, Edge AI is helping get the most out of their data, optimizing space, infrastructure, and asset utilization, managing people and traffic flows, and reducing energy consumption and environmental impact. Enterprises need to drive decisions in real time. And that means taking their AI compute to where the data lives, at the edge. Explore secure and trusted edge computing solutions from Lenovo and NVIDIA.
The world of sports is made up of unforgettable moments. Every moment has the power to tell an infinite amount of stories. WSC Sports AI-powered platform analyzes sports footage in and around the game and automatically creates, manages, and distributes customized content, enabling rights holders to deliver a personalized experience on any platform for every type of fan. Inspiring and engaging fans through AI-tailored content experiences that connect them to the sports they love. Teams, leagues, and broadcasters around the world trust WSC Sports to turn unforgettable moments into unbelievable content. Every moment, an incredible story is being told, and a powerful connection is being made. And for every moment, we are there. WSC Sports. Fuel the fandom.
Welcome to the Sports Loft Summit. You look at the power of the brands, of the teams, of the competitions, of the athletes. Look at the power of those things. We still have an incredible pull.
So we've seen a number of clients now just replacing that whole tab with Storyteller Moments.
We start to see our company as actually an AI agent that you can deploy in sports venues or entertainment venues, even at stadiums or events. And we create this opportunity for this perfect employee.
A common theme across all of our partnerships and our solutions is that the fan is at the center of everything.
What we've built is a remote commentary platform. We're helping leagues, broadcasters and teams produce their live, long-form broadcasts in different languages.
If you think about, as a content owner, sitting on thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of hours of video, being able to find things the way you think about it is very, very powerful.
And recognizing these challenges, we created Opus Clip to really strip away the complexity of short-form video creation.
The other possibility you have is a 3D experience. So 3D, but not 3D as we know it so far. No, it's really good-looking 3D, and you have to experience for yourself.
And so it's almost like the Star Trek holodeck. I can put you in your favorite sport. So you're really there witnessing it, and it's shot with volumetric cameras.
And how can you control that audio? How can you balance out what you want to highlight and what you want to move into the background?
But to be able to build this out and see all these different options, I mean, you're essentially building a show with very little resources. This is so easy, anybody can learn how to use it in minutes.
There are over 250 million people worldwide with a visual disability, and they deserve access to live sports, as we all do.
I'm Paul Wealls. I lead the AIoT Hub, which is sponsored by the National Edge AI Hub. We're a community starting off nearly 10 years ago now around IoT, and as things have evolved with artificial intelligence, we've incorporated that as well. If you go to our website, aiothub.co.uk, you've got about 6 years worth of content on there where we do roughly a monthly show where people come and talk, very similar to today, with academics, industry experts, and people asking relevant questions and understanding challenges. Today, we're very, very privileged to have a great panel with us today. We've got Per Overgaard from Lenovo, CTO. We've got Charlie from Sports Loft, and we've got Roy from WSC Sports. Per, would you like to just do a quick intro of yourself and what you do?
Yes, I'm the CTO for Lenovo for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I run. I have multiple jobs. So one of my jobs is that I run our technical teams across all of those regions. So Lenovo splits that region into 11 markets. So one is UKI. And so we have 11 regions. We have 136 countries, could you believe that? Where we are active, where we have what's called a legal entity. So that means we can operate in those markets. And then I run kind of like the technical development for Lenovo in Europe. So we have a pretty substantial team that work with our customers on our cloud business. So we have one team that runs the cloud business for us in Europe. That's not so we split the cloud business into two. It's very important to understand when we talk about what we're going to talk about today is that we have our tier 1 cloud partners, which is the 10, 11, 12 biggest partners on a global level. So it's kind of like Baidu in China, it's Amazon, Microsoft, when the usual suspects, they're run on a global level. I run the engagement model to everybody below that. So if you have a headquarters somewhere here in the UK or any of the other markets, it's run by my team. I run the high-performance computing and AI team in Europe as well, so they report to me. And then we have a lot of benchmarking, POC, demo capability that we run for whoever customer wants to engage with Lenovo. So we can kind of test whether it works in real life, which is a good functionality to have. It's run out of our factory, so just so you know, we have a fully operational factory in Europe. It's the last of the factory built, so we have a system of 36 factories across the world, 9 main factories, where the one we have in Hungary is the one that operates Europe. So it's products made for Europe, made in Europe, sold for Europe. So 98% of everything that we sell within this region is produced out of that factory. And that's where we have a 36 kilowatt data center that runs all of the products we have in our portfolio, so we can extend that to our customers. Yeah. So,
excellent, thank you, Charlie.
Hi everybody. My name is Charlie. I'm CEO at Sports Loft. We're kind of quite a smaller operation than Lenovo. I think it's probably fair to say. Just a little bit. So we work extensively with a lot of the leading sports organisations in the world. So teams, leagues, brands, broadcasters, some investors as well, helping them understand what the most interesting technologies are out there, what's coming to market, and most importantly, how they can actually apply it and put it into practice. Yeah. Whether that's through, if it's, say, a Premier League team like a Liverpool, how could they use that technology to create a new asset that they could take to their sponsors? If it was a sponsor like Heineken, how could they look at a new technology and actually use that as part of their sponsorship activations? If it was a broadcaster like Sky, how could they start to use some of the technologies in their production, their content creation, even just sort of reducing costs as well. So we're always looking for what we think are the most exciting tech that's out there, which means we see hundreds of different companies every year, and it's kind of like searching for the needles in the haystacks of what's really interesting.
Excellent. And Roy, WSC Sports.
Yeah, hi, I'm Roy, I'm the Director of Business Partnership at WSC Sports. We try to be one of those interesting, innovative companies in the sports industry, and I think we've managed to do quite well. We are the market leader basically for AI-based content experiences in the sports industry. We've built an holistic platform for content creation, organization, and distribution, which is done in a fully automated way in real time. and we had a good fortune of working with about 600 plus sports organizations worldwide. Well, some of them are, the leading leagues, federations, clubs, and broadcasters. And essentially, we try to make sure they can maximize the value of the media rights and help them to engage with their fans wherever they are. So whether it's their own operated platforms, whether it's the social channels, and essentially anything that meets their business objectives as a sport organization. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Roy. So if you hadn't guessed, we're going to talk about sports media and their adoption of edge computing and artificial intelligence, ensuring the things that are actually in practice. And interestingly, Lenovo really drive forward with sponsorship and as technology partners. Would you like to touch on a little bit with that, Per?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be a never-ending story of how many sports companies we are putting our money into. I mean, first of all, let me start with what it is that we're doing. So the normal relationship between Lenovo and the ones that we are sponsoring starts like we're putting money into them, and then we become a technology partner of that company. I mean, being a technology partner basically means that they're kind of signing a contract to use our products, which is fine. Then how it develops is that it very, very often develops into us becoming a very intricate part of what the CIO office does. With that in mind, so we're doing a couple, right? So the one that is the most advanced one is what we do with the Formula One group, who is the ones that are delivering the video that you see, I mean, in any media, right? Mobile phone, tabs, television, right? So the Formula One organization, when they do a stream to 400 million customers every time. So it's quite impressive. And they move this operation across 12 locations yearly, right? So imagine they have to pack all of this technology down, fly it to location, open it up again, and then stream that to their customers. It's a very, very interesting customer for us. I mean, so we're sitting in the development board, and we're actually working with them on our platforms to ensure that we deliver next generation TV to their customers. So that's super interesting. So they're not in the cars. They're kind of the ones that delivers the TV streams. Then we have a sponsorship to Ducati, which I enjoy because I like their bikes. Actually, I was there last week in Bologna in Italy. So the MotoGP, this is racing. Mm-hmm. So we're in MotoGP racing, meaning that we're the one that delivers the technology platforms for the racing team. So the way that it works is that they put a very small person up on a very, very fast motorbike, and he drives around with like top speed, 370 kilometers per hour, if they give it full throttle. And while he's driving, there's a two-way communication in between him and the team lead. And the way that they get that kind of information is through our technology, where edge is a very high element of that, because I mean, the physics of edge is that you need to compute data where data is happening. So edge is kind of like very, very intricate part of what they do. Then we have FIFA. I can't really talk about FIFA because that's the contract we just signed. So that's kind of like right now is we're going to sponsor FIFA. I guess it was very expensive. I don't know. And they're going to buy and use our products in what they do in their daily work. That's going to develop. So I'm not really part of that. And then the fourth one is, that's really not a sponsorship, but I just want to highlight it because I find it very, very interesting. But it's still sports. It's a company called Dalata. I don't think many people know them. You should look them up because it's one of the coolest companies in the world. One, they have a very, very, very nice guy who runs the company, their CEO. He's a super smart person. You can look him up on YouTube. What Dalata does is that they have kind of two missions. They have more, but they're secret. You can't get in and see them. They have two missions. One, they actually built the physical cockpit for the Formula One driver. And so it's a very, very, very expensive industry. I mean, a cockpit for a Formula One car costs somewhere between $15 and $25 million, not to develop building the actual cockpit. It's put into a Formula One car. And I mean, what Dalata says to us is that we cannot crash test a Formula One car because a Formula One car costs like $150 million. So you don't do that. So what we do is that we deliver technology to them, so we can build. We're building a physical digital twin of what they do, and then we crash test the car every minute. So that's pretty cool. Then they have another mission is that they collect data from all of the Formula One companies in the world. Then they kind of take that data and then they bring up kind of like the racing data for next season, and they sell back the data to all of the racing companies. So a big part of that is the technology where we connect into the sports and we ensure that we give them a foundation to develop next generation, sports experience that you guys are highly integrated into.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I was absolutely amazed by that company that you were telling me about in Italy earlier on.
Very cool company. And they build racing. They build some very, very beautiful racing cars as well.
Meet them in Italy. Charlie, you host a fantastic event with Sports Loft, and just seeing how that network comes together and actually the real drive and interest from the media companies and the sponsors. Can you touch on a little bit about like the outcomes that you saw happen from the event that you did last year?
Sure. Well, a lot of what we've tried to do is put really, really interesting, exciting technologies in front of people who are going to be effectively their customers. So whether that's teams and leagues. But I think what you're also seeing a lot, and I think what's really will be of interest for a lot of people in this room, is that a lot of people are using sports as a really great case study, and especially with the sponsors, because frankly, people are really interested in it. It's seen as quite sexy. It gets people's attention. And for a lot of companies, especially large technology companies, looking at, okay, we've got a capability. How can we show how this can be used in a way that people will relate to and people can get quite excited about? And then be like, hey, we've done this for the Olympics. We've done this for Man United. Hey, Mr. Haulage Company, we can do it for you. Hey, Mr. Retail Company, we can do it for you.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot of technology companies, especially, looking at sports as a way to create those use cases and really sort of show what they're capable of as well.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting if you think about the variation of the use cases that it wasn't until I came across WSC Sports a year or two ago and I had a bit of an aha moment of how something that's happening at the point in the data with the edge computing and the content and being recorded that then facilitates what you guys do at WSC Sports. Would you like to go into a little bit more detail about that experience with WSC Sports and what you enabled?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, maybe I'll talk a bit about the journey, right?
Yeah.
And how we started and where we're at today. So first of all, it depends who you ask. We started about 13 years ago, and we identified an opportunity in the sports industry, basically to disrupt the way that content creation workflows work. So up until then, a lot of manual workflows, and we understood that fans and their content consumption behaviors are changing, right? Fans want to see shorter content. They want to see content where they are, so they not necessarily want to see it across linear channels. They don't want to see it. The fans are not usually on the unoperated, not always on the unoperated channels of the media rights owners. And then social media became, a big hub for consuming sports content. But in order to not only deliver the content in a scalable and fast way like fans expect, production crews by sport organization needed to do a leap, let's say. And we entered that void, right? We have a technology, an AI-based technology to automatically generate that short form content. And we wanted to make sure, once again, the sports organization can grow their fan base in a way that is not only local but international, and create new commercial models to be basically commercially viable.
Yeah.
So we had a good fortune of partnering up with the NBA around, again, over 10 years ago. We shared a vision and they understood how they can use this type of technology to go global and build an international fan base. And along the way, we kind of they've been kind of design partner for WSC, and we grew the suite of products a lot, not only for generating highlights and short-form content, but today we also are able to automate different types of content according to the way fans and their consumer behavior have been changing. So if that's around interviews, press conferences, the reactions of fans and players and coaches, how the players arrive to the stadium, essentially make sure we can deliver any type of content experience that are relevant and interesting for fans across any of those channels. So today we support over 50 types of sports, and we keep on growing and doubling down also on Gen AI products. We built a new division that is essentially looking into change the content experiences for different types of audiences, both for rights holders and non-rights holders, because the game will be changing in the upcoming years as it did over the last 10 years or so for content creation workflows.
It's quite amazing, and as we met, it was around actually the mechanics of the process. So with visual data, computer vision, and model training, and sort of like the conversations we had about the challenge that you're having with a particular sporting event. You had a huge portfolio of new sports to create, and the AI needs to be trained, right? And so, would you like to touch on that journey of how you started to look at how you start to train the models quicker and faster, so you could broaden out for more sports?
Yeah. First of all, it's important to mention that each sport at WSC requires a different and dedicated model, right? It's not like we developed an engine that can cater all the different sports because we want to be basically pixel perfect of what we do. The industry has requirements in terms of content production and the way they also do the storytelling for each sport. So we needed to train new models for every sport that we wanted to create within the platform. These are heavy processes that require a lot of data, right? And we wanted to basically leverage tools within the industry and edge technologies to make sure these processes can be optimized, and we can make these processes much faster and optimized again to make sure it doesn't take us, for example, 4 years to build a model for any sport. So we are implementing some external products into the processes. However, it's important to mention that everything is proprietary technology that WSC Sport is developing for any sport, and obviously within any client that we work with, we do the customization according to their requirements, right? So if we're talking about football, for example, there is a way for UEFA to do their storytelling, there's a way for Premier League, and there's a way to the J League in Japan. And we want to make sure to make these adoptions in the models that we're building, so each one of these partners that we work with are able to tell the story in the way they want it to be told.
Fantastic.
But I think what really interesting piece on that is that the impact that things like AI are now having on the commercial setups within the industry. So if you're a sports organisation that's sat on thousands and thousands of hours worth of player data, you have a data set that has value that you could, that previously you might not have been able to use and commercially use it for any gain, but now you can license it to different companies. If you're sat on hundreds of thousands of hours of commentary, you can actually start to license that for commentators' voices to be cloned into different languages. Again, but they've got a data set that's got value. There's also things like, I think in WSC, I think has been a key player in this, but if you look at the change in the commercial rights around highlights, 15 minutes now after the end of a Premier League game, Sky Sports have the highlights clips available. You couldn't do that previously unless you had an AI tool to go and do it. And the AI tool has actually then pushed the licensing rights and the broadcast rights to actually reduce the window, because it used to be 72 hours after the game, then it was 48, then it was 24, and now it's 15. And then you look at the impact on things like YouTube. So my kids were very upset last night because I sent them to bed at half-time during the Real Madrid Man City game. And so the first thing they do this morning was come downstairs and be like, I want to watch the highlights. Where do they go? YouTube is the home of highlights as far as they're concerned. But you've got all the different clips that are there, and if actually the AI capabilities weren't there to enable those clips to be created, YouTube would not have that position in the sports industry as being that sort of home and highlights. And then you can start to do, well, as a sponsor, or rather as a rights holder, what can you do in terms of selling advertising on your YouTube channel, and what share can you get of that? So you start to create yet another commercial revenue stream as well.
It's almost like it creates this whole wealth of new opportunity of revenue and commercialization, because those highlights could be specific about a preferred player that's being played, and with technology like WSC Sports have, you can enable that, right?
I will add and say that, if we look back 20 years ago, right, the media rights agreements that were basically dealt with the industry were looking only at the linear space, right? That was the driving force of the industry. Consumption habits have been changed. Digital has become a great commercial opportunity for the rights owners. and the facilitation of those media rights completely shifted towards well, not completely, but shifted towards the digital opportunity that the audiences hold within the space. So I think within time we'll also see a lot of different carve-outs as we did within the sports industry. So 20 years ago it was only, let's say, linear, then how the betting sector got into play and they carved out that. Now we're going to see that go also for the Gen AI different initiatives. So that's going to take a different play in the upcoming years, at least the way we see it.
Yeah. I mean, look at transfer deadline day a few weeks ago. Yeah. So you got all the players moving between different clubs, and the fans are desperate for content about the player that they've just signed. Yeah. Within minutes of somebody signing for a club, there's a minute and a half highlight clip of that player in the last 12 months and his sort of highlights of the last 12 months and the goals he scored, the tackles he scored. Those clips aren't just sat around for somebody just going to share. People are actually using AI tools to go and create. Yeah. And again, that starts to change the way that people are changing their content consumption. Yeah. And also the expectations that the fans have in terms of the content that's going to be supplied to them as well. Yeah. Which, I think one of the things is kind of amazing that every season there's yet another new thing that's come through around something like highlights or on transfer deadline day or something like that comes along.
I think, from the conversation we were having earlier, Per, it's not just about the content, it's about data, right? Data is truly gold, like what the conversation we had.
Yeah, the two things that really changes, back to what you said, is that the customer on the other end wants to consume the stuff we're producing in a different way, either faster or a different format, and that kind of sets up for developing new products and using technology in different way. And then it's back to the data collection hasn't changed, but the way that we can use data has changed massively, right? Because of the tools. There's some technical stuff we need to fix behind, which is making the data aware and addressable, right, to whatever content it is that we want to put out. But I think the biggest change is that when we look at the product in itself, is that it's changing the way we do innovation. Innovation doesn't necessarily come from the device. It comes from somewhere else, right? It comes from you look at, what kind of pool of data do I actually have? Yeah. And then you create a new product out of that. So I think in the way that we produce either new content, new products, or new solutions, that's changing massively right now, and it just gives us an enormous pool of opportunity.
Yeah, and it's creating new opportunities for businesses and actually creating some really big disruptors. I mean, WSC Sports is a great example of the coming out there and disrupting the market and creating something new and adoptable. What are the things that you've seen recently that you think is really interesting in the media and sports space with the work that you've been doing?
Well, I mean, it's what I said about edge computing. So, edge computing it's not a product; it's a destination, right? So we look at where is it that we can pick up information that we can then put down to a central place and again make new products and new solutions for our customers. And that, it's obvious with AI, but AI is a terminology for how we can produce again new solutions for our customers. So what's really massively changing from customers right now is they're kind of redefining themselves. Yeah. So they're the legacy companies saying, okay, we have a massive, sports is one thing. Car industry, if we use that, right? The car industry is just changing so fast right now. It's not just about cars being produced in China. It's the entire concept of doing cars that's changing. So what I'm hearing you guys is saying is the same thing is happening for the sports industry. For me, there has to be a balance, and I think you guys are better at commenting that, right? There has to be a balancing between putting too much technology in versus still having the analog side of it. For the World Championship in football, right, it changed massively. Is that you started to kind of give tools to the referees, right, so they could look at things in a different way. So again, it's a balance. The same thing for everything that we see is that we try to find a healthy balance of it. Technology in general is not the one that sets the boundaries for what we can do. There's enough compute power in the world right now that we can go way higher than we are.
Yeah. Charlie, with the network that you work in, are you seeing that larger companies are now actually more keen to work with smaller scale-up businesses and adopt this new technology rather than what they have done in the past?
Yeah, I think there's there's a definite willingness on behalf of a lot of sort of sports organisations, for example, to look at working with startup companies. And you've seen that with a lot of organisations like the NBA. They run their Launchpad program. You know, you've had a lot of sort of teams and leagues investing in smaller companies, because in many cases, you know, being able to invest in a company, put them into your operation, create those use cases, you can help add value to that company and genuinely grow the value of your investment as well. And especially when you've got you know, very high net worth individuals who are buying the teams and leagues, they're also looking at doing these investments. They're like, okay, I can grow my net worth here.
Yeah.
So there's an investment side to it. I think what you've also seen though is a willingness of a number of organisations to get better at innovating, better at trying things, sometimes accepting that it doesn't work, but then moving on and trying to iterate and improve what they're doing each time. And often a lot of smaller organisations often have a more flexible and fast-moving mindset to be able to go and do that, and that's been beneficial. But there are still risks with working with a smaller organisation. Yeah. You know that Lenovo, you know that Microsoft, you know that Intel, you know that they're all going to be here like in 2 weeks' time.
I hope so.
You hope so, exactly. But sometimes when you've got a startup that's raised seed funding and then Series A, you know, sometimes.
But it's the same for us. That 2 years ago we worked with the consolidated base of partners and companies, and now we are so heavily involved in startup and scale-up companies because that's where the massive amount of real innovation is coming from.
I think that's dead right. I think though also what we've seen is a slight change in the last couple of years, I think in two ways. One is the impetus that's been put on some of the large organisations to really ramp up their innovation as well. So if you take somebody like Google and YouTube, the level of innovation that's coming out of Google and YouTube at the moment is just astronomical. I was at YouTube a couple of weeks ago and they were taking us through some of the new product enhancements there. Some of them are back end that you, as a consumer, you'd never see, and some of them were front end as you would. And they were just the sheer volume of enhancement was amazing.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that's been really interesting is the amount of AI companies that I would not describe as sports AI technology companies who are very, very well funded, of which sports is one of maybe 10 different verticals.
Yeah.
And they've got technology then it's kind of like, well, how do we apply this into the sports and media vertical? And that's having a real impact because you're seeing incredible levels of products innovation, very well funded around it, and also learning from one vertical and being able to apply that into different verticals as well.
That's actually it's actually interesting, and we've came across a lot of different companies that deal with AI and want to go into the sports industry. And I mentioned that we're doubling down on a full Gen AI division within WSC. And what we've basically started to do is build a large language model which is dedicated for the sports industry, because there are obviously a lot of models out there that we could potentially use off the shelf, right, and do some trainings, but they weren't good enough. We wanted to make sure we build products that are dedicated for sports. So you mentioned also the data pieces, right? The data piece, we sit on a lot of data from the last decade or so, right? We know exactly how to leverage that. We know how to build models that will learn in the best possible way to generate these type of experiences. So using AI in that context is great, but how you tailor it to the sports industry and make sure the experiences and that you're building for your fans are pixel perfect or close to that, this is something that takes a lot of time and dedication, and this is where we see at least the industry is going.
I think that's true. We've just done a piece of quite chunky piece of research actually around sort of archive management. And one of the things that a couple of teams mentioned to us, they were like, we don't want to spend a load of time working with a vendor who does not understand the data feeds that have come from our industry. They have to be able to understand that because that's they're going to be able to slot straight in. So I think that's a very fair point.
There's a lot of, this is just an observation, there's a lot of the AI startups that are very localized. So we have a program and it's very early. We've had it now for 3 years, but it's still very early in the beginnings. And the intention with the AI Innovation Program, which is the name of it, is that we take localized startup scale-up companies, and we put them into this program basically to give them global scale, because many of them are very localized, right? So we're working with a company that does AI and metrics on top of Allreg platforms, who are based in Riyadh in the Middle East. They're just in the Middle East, and they use us as a platform to become global, which is the second phase of it, which is funding. So if you are a startup and a scale-up company, it's very, very difficult to scale up fast and get the money to fund, because the financing behind all of the industry is still very conservative. I mean, if you go, I'm not gonna jinx anybody, but if you go to a normal bank and you ask for funding as a scale-up company, it's very unlikely that they will fund it. So there's kind of like a big wave of venture capitalist companies and some of the legacy banks that are now coming in saying, hey, this is really, they can see that it's consuming a lot of money, right? But they can see that they need to kind of change their investment profiles. So there's a lot of these things that will kind of change the way that we work together. I mean, by the way, it's if we think that it's just Lenovo building one solution, or it's always a conglomerate of companies going together. So we often work with our competitors, right? Because when we can work with Hewlett Packard or some of the other guys to be able to build a full solution, because that's what the customers want, or that's what's needed to build what is eventually going to be the product.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's impressed me since I've joined Lenovo, was the interoperability that we have with what we would perceive as competitors, that actually we're trying to deliver what's best for the customer.
We built one of the first digital cities in the world. That was Barcelona. They were very, very early on to kind of build what's called Smart City Barcelona. And that was a conglomerate that was built out of 160 companies to be able to build what's there today of AR, VR, and lots of other cool stuff that they can do inside that city.
Yeah. One of the things I've observed, which is a little concerning to me, as we were talking about the scale-ups in the funding piece, is that I've seen so many companies that have built a pipeline and they've got past that startup stage. They've started with a small team, but getting across that line into scale-up and trying to get that funding, they've almost gone, well, a lot of them have actually gone pop, because the investors have just taken so long to facilitate the money that they've ended up losing the opportunity and burning out. You know, they've burned brightly and then burned out because they just haven't got that injection to help them.
Well, that's the risk part of it. I think you said it. Right? I mean, somebody needs to do, and that's not us, but somebody needs to do the assessment of if they want to join this wave of innovation, right? I mean, there has to be a new way of thinking of how that we do it. I think the solution will come through different companies will invest into the total, right? So, and then there has to be some risk-adverse money out there to be able to take bigger investments into some of those, maybe not startup, but scale-up companies where you really truly believe in the product that's coming out.
Do you think there's an opportunity for the National Edge AI Hub, as an example, to be able to facilitate some of those environments to do testing and trying for those scale-ups, and which will then move into?
I'm actually working with, I'm actually working with venture capitalist companies and banks right now that helps us as an industry to evaluate the startup and scale-up company. So they actually come in with their backgrounds and look at the business case to see whether that they believe it can fly. And we can look at kind of like the technology front of it. We will have somebody participate from the vertical that we're working with, and then we take the banking sector in to kind of help us to evaluate the entire platform. And then we go to different organizations to help us to participate, right? To make it happen.
That's awesome. So the last question for each of you: what challenges are you seeing that businesses could help in adopting edge computing and AI? And I'm going to start with you, Roy.
Well, maybe I'll touch upon the general challenges that we see within the sports industry. I think the biggest challenge is maintaining the fan base. We see less people consuming live sports content, which was the driving force of the industry. So sport organizations need to find new ways to engage with younger audiences. There is a true battle for their attention span, right, which is already decreasing. So if you're fighting, with social media platforms on the one hand, or the big streaming platforms, you need to find ways to make sure you reach into those audiences. There's a late research that indicates that sports fans are becoming sports fans until they're 14. So you need to make sure you create innovative experiences that actually, speak to those younger kids. And I think AI, and again, generative AI technology could enter into that exact space and make sure you can create scalable, localized, and even personalized types of content that will help you make sure your fan base is big enough, so again you can still be commercially viable. Because the media rights agreement that held the industry will change. There's going to be more consolidation, and there is a need for new tools and innovation that will be based on AI for sure. And this is where startups can be, the focal point.
Yeah, Charlie.
I'll go for a challenge, but also an opportunity around it as well. But I think that a lot of what we're seeing in terms of innovative new companies coming to market and AI technologies are challenging a lot of the traditional ways that business has been done within the sports industry. And I think if you look at the agency model, which is very well established in the sports industry, and by that I mean an agency selling sponsorship on behalf of a team or a league, or an agency helping a brand activate their sponsorship.
Yeah.
They're very traditional, quite human-intensive organisations, and if you look at a lot of, say, a mid-ranking Premier League club, it's not a big organisation. They don't want to have lots of stuff on their books, so they've tended to use agencies. Now you look at a lot of the tools, and you're like, I don't need an agency to be doing that. So, a good example, we do a podcast. Everybody go and sign up for our podcast. It's brilliant. But we do a podcast, and we video the podcast, and we create a set of social media clips on the back of it. We use a tool called Opus Clip. Very, very cheap to go and use it. Use it as well. Very, very effective. It's great what it does, and within 5 minutes, I've got probably 20 or 30 different clips to choose from. By the time that I've gone in and edited them a little bit, maybe it's taken me an hour and a half to go and do it. I'm not a video editor, but a trained video editor will probably have taken about 6 hours to get to that particular point. Now you've got agencies who are there going, oh yeah, we'll go and do that for you, and we'll charge you X £100 per person per day to go and do it. Now we're talking, come along and do it for an hour and a half without having to have anybody else come in there.
With better content coming out.
I would argue so as well.
Yeah.
And I did one the other day. I took an AI model from a company called 11 Labs, who have been doing some fantastic work, and they've created a conversational AI capability that you can basically go in and build your own conversational AI chatbot, effectively. So, with the Six Nations rugby at the moment, I pointed the chatbot at the Six Nations website and created it in Johnny Wilkinson's voice. And I was saying, hey, Johnny, who was the highest try scorer in the 2024 Six Nations tournament? It gave me the answer. Who scored the most penalties? It gave me the answer. It took me about 2 hours to do it. Was it perfect? Did it get it right every time? No. And I think part of that was due to probably the HTML coding actually on the website was confusing it more than anything else. But if you'd have given it a clean data feed, even better. Could you have got the voice better than I did? Yes, you could. But that was 2 hours of me doing it. Let's say we just did it for 48 hours and we got it right. We've got agencies out there who are charging a lot of money to brands and rights holders to go and create these activations that are days and days and days. We've just come up with a really great activation in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things start to change the commercial dynamics within the industry.
And I think the interesting thing that you touched on there is it's actually the creativity that comes from playing.
Yes.
And you start to see what happens with it. And it's one of the things I've really enjoyed when I've been playing with AI for the past couple of years now. And it's getting easier and easier and easier every month, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, hold on. And you start digging and playing and prompting, and all of a sudden you get some really cool stuff coming from it. Per challenges.
Yeah, well, if it's not a sports question, but a technology question, then, first of all, I think if you try to work for a perfection all the time, you'll never get a product out there.
Yeah.
So you need to take some risk and jump hoops and deliver sometimes an 80% done project to be able to get in front of the technology wave or do new cool things. But it implies one big thing, and that, for me, the biggest concern is by far security. Opening up data platforms, right? I've worked with a big car company in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we know everything about our customer. We know every screw in our cars. but we can't let that data out in the open, right? Because if there is a security breach somewhere, we basically screwed. That will close down the company, right? Yeah. So there's a big security issue because we are opening up new doors, because we're giving people access to the data. That's a big issue that we have to solve. I think we are close to having some technologies where we can compute on top of encrypted data, for instance. Then there is power consumption, right? So my son just graduated as an engineer. His PhD was on power consumption in Europe, and it's pretty scary if you look at when we will actually hit rock bottom in terms of having enough power to drive the innovation that we're putting out there. Yeah. That's a big issue. If you're going to do it on a green terms, if there is ever a green term in terms of running a data center, then that's a problem because AI is consuming a lot of power. And then there is, for sure, the technology development. I shouldn't say this, but I'm actually genuinely, concerned about the development that companies like NVIDIA is driving. The window in between next generation products is getting smaller and smaller, and that drives a very unhealthy environment at the customers that has to kind of innovate on behalf of an NVIDIA GPU, right? It goes from H100, H200, B200, B300, and it's going very, very quickly. And they cost like $150,000 per card, which is insane. So, but again, there is a solution for it. We're working on some software technologies where we can load balance across old platforms and new platforms. But again, there is concerns in terms of where technology is taking us, but I also think it's opportunity. It's both, right? And we have to kind of balance in between those.
Yeah, I agree.
I still think that humanity will prevail and we will win all in the end.
I hope so.
I get better spirits.
I get scared sometimes. I hope so. Do we have time for questions? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for the panel?
So, do we see any use cases in edge computing where you think of running the models or training the models on the edge?
Sorry, I'm going to repeat the question because we're recording. So, do we have any examples and use cases of training the models at the edge, not just inferencing at the edge?
If that's, I can try and answer that question. Yes, it's a very short answer. We have lots of those. I'm not trying to promote the Lenovo products, but inside Lenovo, there's a very wide range of edge products, right? So we start with a $400 very small unit, which is kind of base to go into, and one of them is sitting inside my house, up to the biggest platform where we can run up to 4 GPUs inside the platform. So we have huge amount of compute capacity inside edge platforms. Training is definitely going on in the edge. It's in the very early beginnings, because again, it's back to what I said, is that the challenges for these customers is they are definitely testing off the use cases. Remember that, the first wave of AI really happened in the tier 1 cloud. Now the customers are pulling back, and they're going to say, yes, we need to, first of all, take care of our own data, and then we're going to build it in the edge because we need to compute where the data is happening. So that's what's going on right now, is that this, I call it the second wave of AI, the second wave of compute is happening now. We have helped the customers to facilitate that. So short answer, yes, it's going on. It's in the early stages, but I truly believe that this year, 25, is the year where we will see that escalate very, very, very fast. I think our job is to help the customers to understand the possibilities inside the technology. Again, what I said is that it's not the amount of compute power we have in front of us. It's trying to figure out how to use it. And that's in between, I guess, what you do versus what I do, is that's a combination, is that we have to go to the customers and help them to understand how to use the technology to produce a product. Because eventually it's all about the business case. It's all about the use case that you want to drive. It's always the business outcome.
Yeah. To some extent, data is not a problem because a lot of people are generating synthetic data. So last week someone shared a study, 60% of all the data is synthetic data. And for the next 2 or 3 years, 20% of all data would become synthetic data. So people will hardly be using their real data to train the models. So then it means that ethics and security will be less of issue. People would send their data to some extent large data centers, train the models, and still use that for inference. So all those issues about security, ethics probably would be less of importance as things are progressing.
I agree. I mean, so if you think about the encryption that I just talked about, right? So we have one company here in the UK that I just met recently with one of the guys working here. Is that company is very advanced in terms of doing computation on top of encrypted data, and that will actually take us very quickly to where I think you and I want to go, right? That we go to the edge and we can basically compute anything without actually knowing what it is that we're computing. So I'm just saying within a very short time frame, there will be a solution for some of that. But I think the real answer to your question is the enterprise companies, which are the ones that we primarily work with, are not very advanced. They're still waiting on trying to figure out what it is that they want to do, and then go backwards. They roll back from this is what we think we could build, how do we build it, and then we start to build the use cases.
There's a couple of examples of products that I've worked on over the past few years, like Intel Getty. That's actually it can be an on-prem platform run in the cloud with an edge server. So we had use cases at Royal Brompton Hospital. They use that because they want to secure their data. They've got it on an edge server, and then they've got the inferencing running on their laptops. And there's also John Deere manufacturing out in Spain. Same thing. They didn't want their data getting out of anywhere, and that's for a guided AI system to basically have people who are inexperienced on producing stuff on the production line to basically take them through a step-by-step guide, and they train the models at the server at the edge and annotate with Getty, which speeds up the process with a much smaller data set. There's a lot more of those democratized platforms coming through to enable that edge training side of things as well as the inferencing side.
I would say I actually think on the use case piece that's been really interesting in the last couple of years. I would say it used to be 4 or 5 years ago that you get lots of criticisms of companies, especially in sort of like venture capital and early stage investment circles. So, that's a technology looking for a home, technology looking for a problem. Now I think it's starting to change a little bit, and actually I think the technology is becoming an inspiration for what you can actually start to go and do with that.
I agree.
And I think that change I've certainly seen that in the last couple of years come through, and I think that's a really powerful change. And now that's a technology looking for a home argument isn't necessarily made by a smart investor. It's made by somebody who's like, I just don't want to go there and I'm too scared of what's there.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been really interesting, that change.
Yeah. I mean, my perfect example is always the car industry. Right? I mean, the transformation that's happened within 5 years ago, we were all driving with basically the same infotainment inside all of the cars. Very boring, very, very old-fashioned. Something that was built in the 90s, while now we all have big computer screens in front of us, right? And we get all sorts of information and data into our cars. And by the way, that's just the first step of what's actually going on in the car factories right now. So the point here is that the consumers on the other side are putting pressure back to the industry, saying if you're going to deliver a product to us, which is back to your experience comment, is that if you have to deliver a product to us, this is what we want. So that puts a lot of pressure on the industry, which is again giving us the opportunity to use the technology to bring those use cases to life.
I think to your point, this is already happening, right? This change and the way that you can also connect in real time, to cars, to smart cars, to in the near future autonomous cars, right? And make sure people can use the time they're spending in their cars in a much more effective way. On the one hand, for work-wise, but also for different types of entertainments. Sports, obviously, being a big part of it. Talking about the German company that maybe we'll work with the same German company, but we're already pushing those real-time highlights onto these cars, and we see this as a great business case for exactly in that interjection, right, between the big tech companies, the car manufacturers, and the rights owners, and we're trying to be the facilitators for these types of experiences.
And then there's the generation part, which is your daughters, right, going to look highlights on YouTube. I mean, I see the same thing for my daughters, is that's kind of like the media that they use. So that automatically puts pressure on how we deliver next generation solutions, which I think is super cool. But you have to really ensure that you don't fall behind, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the generation thing, 60% of users of ChatGPT are kids doing the homework. One last question. Does anybody have any questions?
Maybe just expand a bit on that use case point that you were saying, Charlie. Where do you see the biggest pools of value in the near term within the sports industry for these technologies? Obviously, WSC, as I understand, is basically expediting the creation of kind of highlight clips. You mentioned archiving. Are there any kind of really key areas where you see this being adopted faster or in larger scale?
Yes, lots. I think pretty well there's not pretty well. I would say there's not many areas of a sports organisation or a football club that couldn't benefit in some way from AI. The willingness to adopt it might not always be there, but whether it's a resource saving or a cost saving or time saving type measure, so like the podcast clipping one I was saying before, if all of a sudden you're going to free up an extra 3.5 hours for one of your content team, what else could they go and do with that time? I think that's really strong. But you also always look at the playing side. The reality is that every team in the Premier League or in the NBA or the NFL, if you can get that extra small percentage that makes the difference between winning and losing it, they will invest in those because winning makes such a big difference commercially. You look at things like player return from injury. For every day that a player comes back sooner, not only are they saving money in terms of wages, but they're more likely to win the next game that might then get them into the Champions League or might get them further up the table. So player return from injury is a massive opportunity. And there's been a number of companies that have been applying a lot of AI models into that. Some have probably been more successful than others. A lot of it comes down to also the willingness of the manager and the coach to look at those models and work with those models, because those models aren't always going to be right. There's a lot of judgment. It's another source of information that the coach needs to make a judgment on. But if you can actually start to really impact it, you can make a significant difference commercially to the success of that team if you can get a player back quicker. There's huge opportunities on the broadcast side. I think the dynamics of the broadcast industry are changing dramatically. So you look at some of the financial numbers coming out of the big broadcasters, they're not great. Streaming isn't necessarily being seen as this great saviour anymore that it might have been. So how can actually some of these technologies impact either their cost base or their revenue opportunities around things like broadcasting? That then has a knock-on impact into the value of TV rights that has a knock-on impact to the clubs as well. So I think it's pretty well all pervasive.
Excellent. Thank you very much to Roy, who's travelled in, Per, who travelled in and flew in today as well, Charlie for getting the train down the road. Thank you very much for staying and watching us. We are looking for a speaker for March. If anybody's interested in coming and doing a live stream with us, thank you very much and good night.